When I walked back into that building with the acquisition papers in my briefcase, the head of security's face went from smug satisfaction to absolute horror in about 3 seconds. He'd thrown me out 90 minutes earlier for loitering. Now he was staring at documentation proving I owned the entire company. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. Real stories, real justice, no sugarcoating, you know what. I notice many of you watching haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Here's the thing. We drop stories like this every single day. Stories about people who got played, got smart, and got even. If you want to see how these situations really end, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Vincent, and 6 months ago I became the owner of a mid-sized manufacturing company through the most satisfying business acquisition of my career. But that's not where this story starts. It starts 3 years earlier when I was working as a consultant, and it starts with my mentor telling me something I'd never forget. Gerald was 67, built 3 companies from nothing, and had more business wisdom in his pinky finger than most CEOs accumulate in a lifetime. We were having lunch when he told me, "Vincent, the best business opportunities look like disasters from the outside. Everyone sees the mess. Nobody sees the foundation underneath." He was talking about Meridian Manufacturing, a company he'd worked with decades ago that was now struggling. He'd kept track of it over the years, watched it decline under poor management, and he thought it had potential for someone with vision and patience. I was 34, had built a solid consulting practice, and had been looking for the right acquisition target. I'd saved aggressively, made smart investments, and had access to capital through relationships I'd built over 15 years in the industry. But I wasn't looking for something easy. I wanted something I could transform. Gerald's description of Meridian caught my attention immediately. The company manufactured specialized industrial components. Their core product line was solid, their patents were valuable, and their client relationships went back decades. But profits had fallen for 3 straight years. Employee turnover was climbing. Word in the industry was that management had lost touch with both the workforce and the market. The current owner, Richard Castellano, was looking to sell. He'd inherited the company from his father but never had the passion or the skill to run it properly. I spent 6 months studying Meridian from every angle. I reviewed their financials, talked to former employees, analyzed their competition, and evaluated their assets. What I found was exactly what Gerald had suggested. A solid foundation buried under years of mismanagement. The core business was profitable. The problems were all fixable. Poor leadership, bloated middle management, disconnected ownership, and a toxic culture that had developed when nobody at the top cared enough to maintain standards. I put together an acquisition proposal that was aggressive but fair. Richard wanted out badly enough that he was willing to negotiate. We spent 4 months working through due diligence, financing arrangements, and transition planning. The deal was structured so that I'd take full operational control immediately upon closing, with a 6-month earn-out period for Richard to extract himself completely. Here's where my strategy got specific. I told absolutely nobody outside my legal and financial team about the acquisition. Richard agreed to keep it confidential until closing. I wanted to see the company exactly as it operated when nobody knew the owner was watching. I'd heard stories from former employees about security guards who acted like tyrants, managers who spent more time on their phones than managing, and an executive team that had stopped caring about quality or culture years ago. My plan was simple. Close the deal quietly on a Friday morning. Then instead of announcing myself immediately, I'd dress down, show up at the facility like a regular visitor, and see how people actually behaved when they thought nobody important was paying attention. It was unconventional, but I'd learned over the years that you learn more about an organization in 15 minutes of unannounced observation than in 15 hours of scheduled meetings. The closing happened exactly as planned. Friday morning, 9 a.m. in my attorney's conference room. Richard signed the papers, I transferred the funds, and just like that, Meridian Manufacturing belonged to me. Richard looked relieved. He shook my hand, wished me luck, and said he'd have his personal items cleared out by end of business. I thanked him, walked out to my car, and changed my entire approach. I'd worn a suit to the closing. Now I changed into jeans, work boots, a plain t-shirt, and an old jacket. I hadn't shaved in 3 days. I looked like someone who might be showing up for a warehouse job interview, or maybe a delivery driver, or just someone who'd wandered in off the street. That was exactly the point. I wanted to see how people treated someone they perceived as unimportant. The Meridian facility was 20 minutes across town. I'd been there once before during due diligence, but that visit had been announced, scheduled, and carefully managed. Everyone had been on their best behavior. Today would be different. I parked in the visitor lot, grabbed a notebook I'd deliberately chosen to look worn and cheap, and walked toward the main entrance. The lobby was exactly what you'd expect from a 70-year-old manufacturing company that had stopped investing in appearances. Dated furniture, scuffed floors, faded company photos on the walls. Behind a desk sat a receptionist who didn't look up from her phone when I walked in. I waited about 30 seconds. She still didn't. "Acknowledge me," finally I said. "Excuse me." She glanced up with obvious annoyance. "Yeah, I'm here to look around the facility." Her expression immediately shifted to suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I don't." "Then you can't just look around. This is private property." I stayed calm. "I understand. Is there someone I could speak with about the facility? About what specifically?" "I'm interested in how operations run here." She looked me up and down, taking in my casual clothes and unshaven face. Her tone shifted from suspicion to outright dismissal. "Yeah, we're not hiring right now. You can check the website for job postings." "I'm not looking for a job." "Then what do you want?" "Like I said, I'm interested in seeing how things operate." She rolled her eyes and picked up her phone. "Frank, there's some guy in the lobby who wants to look around. Can you come up here?" She hung up and went back to her cell phone without another word to me. 2 minutes later, a security guard walked into the lobby. Frank was probably 50, overweight, with a uniform that looked like it hadn't been properly maintained in months. His expression was already annoyed before he even reached me. "Help you?" he said, in a tone that clearly communicated he had no interest in actually helping. "I was hoping to see the facility," I said. "And who exactly are you?" "My name is Vincent." "Vincent who?" "Vincent Caruso." He stared at me for a moment, then looked at the receptionist. "Is he on any visitor list?" She didn't even check. "Nope." Frank turned back to me. "So you just walked in here wanting to tour a private manufacturing facility with no appointment, no authorization, and no business being here?" "I have business being here," I said calmly. "Oh yeah, what business is that?" "I'd prefer to discuss that with someone in management." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Let me guess, you've got some brilliant idea you want to pitch, some invention that's going to revolutionize everything, or maybe you're doing research for some project." He made air quotes around research. "Something like that," I said. "Yeah, we get guys like you every couple months. Think you can just walk into a company and get a tour because you're curious. Doesn't work that way, buddy. This is a business, not a museum." "I understand. Could you call someone from senior management? I think they'd want to speak with me." "Senior management doesn't want to speak with some random guy who walks in off the street. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and walk back out that door. If you actually have legitimate business here, you can call during business hours and try to schedule an appointment like everyone else. But showing up like this," he gestured at my clothes. "Yeah, that's not going to fly." The receptionist was watching now, clearly entertained. I could see this was exactly the kind of thing that happened regularly here. Security treating visitors with disdain, receptionist enjoying the show, nobody caring about making a professional impression. I stayed perfectly calm. "I really think you should call someone from management before asking me to leave." "I don't think anything of the sort. You know what I think? I think you're loitering. And if you don't leave voluntarily in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to escort you out. Your choice." I stood there for a moment running calculations. I could reveal who I was right now, or I could let this play out and see exactly how bad things had become. The second option would be more useful. I needed to understand the full scope of the culture problem. "All right," I said. "I'll leave." "Smart choice," Frank said. He actually followed me to the door, watched me walk across the parking lot, and stood there until I got in my car. The message was clear. I wasn't welcome, and he was making sure I understood that. I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, pulled out my laptop, and spent 90 minutes reviewing every piece of documentation I had on the security department, the reception area protocols, and the visitor management policies. What I found was enlightening. According to company policy, all visitors who requested to speak with management were supposed to be directed to the operations manager or the HR director. Security was supposed to be professional and courteous. There were specific protocols for handling unannounced visitors that involved at minimum a courtesy call to management before asking anyone to leave. None of that had happened. Frank had never called anyone. The receptionist had never checked any list. They'd simply decided I didn't look important enough to bother with, and they'd thrown me out. I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, Helen, confirming all documents were filed and recorded. The second was to my financial advisor, confirming all funds had cleared. The third was to Gerald, who laughed when I told him what had just happened. "You're surprised?" he asked. "Not surprised, confirmed. I knew culture was bad, but this is worse than I expected. So what's your play?" "I'm going back, this time with documentation, and I'm cleaning house starting immediately." "Good, that's exactly what that place needs." At 11:30, I drove back to Meridian. This time I wore a suit. I carried my briefcase containing the acquisition documents, the signed agreements, and a leather portfolio with the company seal embossed on the front that Richard had given me during closing. I parked in the spot marked Reserved Owner and walked back into that lobby. The same receptionist was still at the desk. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see her trying to place me. The suit threw her off. She wasn't sure if I was the same person from earlier. "Can I help you?" she asked, more professional this time, but still not particularly warm. "I'm here to see whoever's in." "Charge of daily operations," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need one," her professional demeanor cracked. "Sir, we don't allow walk-in meetings. You need to schedule." "Call Frank," I said. She blinked. "What? Your security guard, Frank, the one who escorted me out 2 hours ago. Call him up here." Now she looked nervous. "Sir, I don't think." "Call him now, please." She picked up the phone with shaking hands. 30 seconds later, Frank came through the door, saw me, and his face went through an interesting sequence of emotions. Confusion first, then recognition, then something like concern when he saw the suit and briefcase. "This is the guy from earlier," the receptionist said. "He says he doesn't need an appointment." Frank walked up to me, trying to look authoritative but clearly uncertain. "Look, I told you earlier that you need to leave. Coming back in different clothes doesn't change that." "Actually," I said calmly, "it changes everything." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a document folder. "My name is Vincent Caruso. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the owner of Meridian Manufacturing. I now own this building, this company, and technically I'm your employer." I handed him the top document from my folder. "That's the recorded deed transfer. You're welcome to verify it." The blood drained from his face. The receptionist actually gasped. Frank stared at the document like it might bite him. "I came here 2 hours ago to conduct an unannounced inspection of my new facility," I continued. "I was treated with disrespect, never offered the courtesy of a management contact, and physically escorted from property I legally own. So here's what's going to happen now. You're going to call whoever's currently acting as operations manager. You're going to tell them the new owner is here. And then you're going to wait right here while I decide what to do about your employment status." Frank opened his mouth, closed it, opened it. "Again, sir, I had no idea. Nobody told us there was a new owner." "That's not an excuse for how you treat visitors. Call the operations manager now." He fumbled for his radio. "This is Frank in the main lobby. I need Bruce up here immediately. Tell him it's urgent." We stood there in complete silence for about 3 minutes. The receptionist looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Frank kept glancing at me and then at the document, as if hoping it would somehow change. Bruce arrived looking annoyed. He was mid-40s, dressed business casual, and had the bearing of someone who'd been coasting on autopilot for years. "What's so urgent that I had to drop a meeting?" he asked Frank. "Bruce Hennigan," I asked. He turned to me. "Yes, and you are Vincent Caruso, the new owner, as of this morning." His expression went from annoyance to shock in an instant. "I'm sorry, what?" I handed him the same documentation. "The acquisition closed at 9 a.m. I'm here to begin operational transition." He scanned the documents, his face growing paler. "Richard didn't tell us anything about this. The sale was confidential until closing, but it's done now and I'm here." Of course, I apologize, Mr. Caruso. If we'd known you were coming." "That's actually the point," I interrupted. "I wanted to see how this facility operates when nobody knows the owner is watching, and what I saw in my first visit was deeply concerning." "First visit?" Bruce asked, confused. "I was here 2 hours ago, dressed differently. I was treated with complete disrespect and physically escorted from the property by your security guard without anyone bothering to call management or follow proper visitor protocols." Bruce's eyes went wide. He turned to Frank. "You threw out the new owner." Frank looked like he might be sick. "I didn't know he looked like—" He caught himself before finishing that sentence. Like what? I asked quietly. Like someone who didn't deserve basic professional courtesy, like someone whose presence wasn't worth a simple phone call to verify. The silence was devastating. Bruce, I said, I want every member of your management team in the main conference room in 30 minutes. Everyone at director level and above, no exceptions. Yes, sir, absolutely. I'll send the message right now. Good. And Bruce, that meeting I interrupted when you came up here, that's canceled. Everything else today is canceled. Your only priority for the rest of this day is this transition. Understood, Mr. Caruso. I turned to the receptionist. What's your name? Kimberly, she said quietly, barely above a whisper. Kimberly, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an honest answer. Is the way you treated me this morning typical of how you treat visitors who don't look important? She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Thank you for being honest. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to spend the next 30 minutes writing down every instance you can remember where visitors were treated dismissively or unprofessionally. Times, dates if you remember them, and what happened. You're going to deliver that document to my office before end of business today. Your employment status will be reviewed based on your cooperation and your previous record. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I turned to Frank. You're suspended effective immediately, pending a full review. You'll receive notification about your status within 48 hours. Leave your badge, radio, and keys with Bruce, then leave the facility. Mr. Caruso, please. I'm not interested in excuses. You had multiple opportunities to make different choices this morning. You chose poorly. Leave the facility. He unclipped his badge and radio with shaking hands and placed them on the reception desk. Then he walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt final. Bruce stood there looking shell-shocked. I'll gather the management team, he said. One more thing, I added. I want complete personnel files for everyone in security, everyone in reception, and everyone at your level and above, on my desk in the conference room before the meeting starts. That's a lot of files in 30 minutes, sir. Then I suggest you move quickly. He practically ran back toward the offices. I spent the next 30 minutes walking through the public areas of the facility. The lobby was shabby. The hallways had scuff marks that hadn't been touched up in years. Employee break rooms were dated and poorly maintained. Bulletin boards displayed notices that were months out of date. Everything I saw confirmed the same story. Nobody in management cared enough to maintain standards. At 12:30, I walked into the main conference room. 11 people were seated around a long table, all looking nervous. Bruce had clearly told them something, but nobody seemed certain what was happening. A stack of personnel files sat at the head of the table. I took the seat at the head, opened my briefcase, and pulled out a legal pad and the acquisition documents. Then I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. Good afternoon, I said calmly. My name is Vincent Caruso, and as of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the owner of Meridian Manufacturing. Some of you may have heard about the sale. Most of you probably didn't. That was intentional. Richard wanted the transition to be smooth, and I wanted to observe operations without advance notice. I let that sink in for a moment. This morning, I conducted an unannounced inspection of this facility. I dressed casually and entered through the main lobby as an unknown visitor. I was treated with disrespect, dismissed without proper protocols, and physically escorted from the property by security without anyone bothering to contact management. That experience, combined with what I've observed in the last hour walking through this facility, tells me everything I need to know about the culture that's developed here. The room was absolutely silent. Several people looked at Bruce, who was staring at the table. I've spent 6 months studying this company, I continued. I know your financials, I know your operational metrics, I know your market position, your client relationships, and your competitive standing. This business has a solid foundation, good products, strong patents, loyal customers. But profitability has fallen for 3 years straight. Employee turnover is climbing and morale is terrible. Those problems don't come from the market, they come from leadership. I opened the first personnel file. Bruce Hennigan, operations manager for 6 years. During your tenure, operational efficiency has declined by 18%, employee satisfaction scores have dropped by 23 points, and safety incident reports have increased by 40%. You've done nothing to address any of these trends. Your own reviews describe you as adequate but uninspired. That's not acceptable. Bruce looked like he'd been slapped. I opened the next file. Jennifer Torres, HR director for 4 years. Turnover in hourly positions is running at 32% annually. Your exit interview documentation shows repeating complaints about hostile work environment, poor communication from management, and lack of professional development opportunities. You've implemented no meaningful initiatives to address any of these issues. Jennifer's face went red. I went through 5 more files. Each one told the same story: mediocre performance, declining metrics, lack of initiative, and absence of accountability. Nobody in this room had pushed for improvement. Nobody had challenged the status quo. They'd all just collected paychecks while the company slowly deteriorated. When I finished, I closed the last file and looked around the room. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "Effective immediately, this company is under new management. My management. Every policy, every procedure, every standard is under review. Some of you will remain with this company through the transition. Some of you will not. That decision depends on your willingness to embrace change and your ability to demonstrate value." I pulled out a document I'd prepared. "This is a 30-day performance improvement plan. Each of you will receive a customized version by end of business today. You'll have specific metrics to hit, specific initiatives to launch, and specific standards to meet. In 30 days, we'll review your progress. Those who meet expectations will continue. Those who don't will be terminated." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "I want to be clear," I continued. "I'm not looking for excuses or explanations about why things have been the way they are. I'm not interested in blame or finger-pointing. I'm only interested in results moving forward. This company is going to be profitable again. It's going to be a place where good employees want to work and excellent work is the standard. Anyone who can't commit to that vision should tell me now." Nobody spoke. "Good. Bruce, you're relieved as operations manager, effective immediately. You'll transition to a special projects role while I evaluate whether you have value in this organization. Carl McAdams will assume interim operations management." Bruce's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Carl," I continued, addressing a younger man who'd been sitting quietly, "I reviewed your file. You've been pushing for operational improvements for 2 years. You've been ignored by previous management. That ends now. You'll report directly to me until I hire a permanent COO." Carl looked stunned. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." "Jennifer, you'll work with me personally to develop a complete overhaul of HR policies, recruitment standards, and retention programs. You have one chance to prove you can. Adapt, don't waste it." "I won't, Mr. Caruso." I spent the next hour outlining immediate changes. Security protocols were being completely rewritten. Reception standards were being elevated. Employee break rooms would be renovated within 60 days. Maintenance standards would be enforced. Every manager would undergo customer service training. Safety protocols would be reviewed and strengthened. When I finished, I dismissed everyone except Carl. Once the room cleared, I handed him a detailed operational audit plan. "This is what I need from you," I said. "Complete assessment of every department, every process, every system. I want to know what's working, what's broken, and what's mediocre. 30 days. Can you do it?" He looked at the document, and I could see him calculating. "It's ambitious, but yes, I can do it." "Good. You'll have full authority to access any records, interview any employees, and investigate any concerns. Anyone who doesn't cooperate gets reported to me directly. I want complete transparency." "You'll have it. One more thing, the safety incident increases. What's behind them?" His jaw tightened. "Poor training, corner-cutting on maintenance, and pressure from management to hit production targets regardless of safety concerns. I've been flagging it for 18 months. Document everything. Every incident, every near miss, every time someone raised a safety concern that was ignored. I want names, dates, and details. You're going to fire people. I'm going to fire everyone who put profit above employee safety, every single one." He nodded slowly. "That's going to be a lot of people. Then we'll hire better ones." Over the next 2 weeks, I worked 16-hour days. I interviewed every manager personally. I walked the production floor and talked to hourly workers. I reviewed contracts, assessed vendors, and analyzed financial systems. What I found was worse than I'd expected in some ways, better in others. The core workforce was actually excellent. Skilled, experienced, loyal people who'd been demoralized by years of poor leadership. The production systems were solid. The equipment was well maintained by dedicated technicians despite management pressure to cut maintenance budgets. The sales team had maintained customer relationships through sheer personal commitment despite getting no support from leadership. But the management layer was rotten. Entitled, complacent, and in several cases actively destructive. Bruce wasn't the worst, he was just checked out. But the CFO had been quietly steering contracts to vendors who gave him kickbacks. The quality manager had been falsifying inspection reports to meet shipping deadlines. The maintenance supervisor had been ordering unnecessary parts and selling them privately. I fired 11 people in the first 2 weeks. Every termination was documented, legally reviewed, and completely justified. Some left quietly. Some threatened lawyers. None had a legitimate case because I'd built an airtight paper trail for every decision. The security department was completely overhauled. Frank was terminated for cause. His personnel file revealed multiple complaints about aggressive behavior toward visitors and vendors that had been ignored by previous management. I hired a professional security consulting firm to redesign protocols and retrain the entire team. The receptionist, Kimberly, actually survived her review. She'd been following the terrible example set by management, but her written documentation of past incidents showed she understood the problems and wanted to improve. I kept her on probation. Carl was exceptional. His operational audit was thorough, insightful, and brutally honest. He identified 37 specific operational inefficiencies, 12 safety violations that had been systematically ignored, and 6 areas where the company was leaving money on the table through poor contract management. I promoted him to COO after 3 weeks. By the end of the first month, word had spread through the company that things were different. The employee break rooms had been renovated. New safety equipment had been ordered. A suggestion program was launched where workers could submit improvement ideas directly to management. Production targets were adjusted to eliminate corner-cutting pressure. 3 employees who'd been treated poorly by previous management received apologies and compensation adjustments. The change in morale was dramatic. People started showing up differently. Small things at first: cleaner uniforms, better maintenance of work areas, more communication between shifts. Then bigger things: production quality improved, safety incidents dropped to nearly 0, and voluntary turnover fell by half in just 4 weeks. The financial impact was slower but real. By month 3, profit margins had improved by 8%. By month 6, we'd landed 2 major new contracts because quality metrics had improved enough to qualify for certifications previous management had never bothered pursuing. I brought Gerald in as a consultant during month 4. We walked the production floor together, and he stopped to talk with a machine operator named Louis who'd been with the company for 19 years. "How are things different under new ownership?" Gerald asked him. Louis thought for a moment. "It feels like somebody actually cares whether we succeed or fail. Old management, they just collected paychecks and went home. This guy," he gestured toward me. "He shows up at 6 a.m. sometimes, asks questions, actually listens to answers. He fixed our break room. He bought new safety equipment. He fired the supervisor who was stealing. Feels like we're building something again instead of just watching it fall apart." Later, Gerald and I sat in my office, and he smiled. "You handled this exactly right. Firm but fair. You removed the rot and invested in the foundation." "There's still a long way to go," I said. "Of course, but you've changed the trajectory. That's what matters." He was right. The company wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction with clear momentum. 6 months after the acquisition, I held an all-hands meeting in the main production facility. Every employee, office staff, production workers, maintenance crew, sales team, gathered in the space we'd cleared near the shipping area. I stood on a small platform where everyone could see me. "6 months ago," I began, "I walked into this building for the first time as your owner. Most of you didn't know who I was. Some of you saw me get thrown out by security because I didn't look like I belonged here." That got a few nervous laughs. The story had spread through the company within days. I let that happen because I wanted to see this place as it really was, not as it pretended to be during scheduled visits. What I saw told me everything I needed to know. This company had great bones but terrible leadership. Good people being held back by bad management. Solid products being undermined by poor culture. I paused and looked around the room. In 6 months, we've made significant changes. We've removed managers who weren't serving this company well. We've promoted people who were ready to lead. We've invested in equipment, facilities, and safety. We've raised standards and held everyone, including me, accountable to them. The results speak for themselves. Profits are up, quality is up. Safety incidents are down, turnover is down. We've landed new contracts and strengthened relationships with existing customers. People were nodding. I could see pride in their faces. But I want to be clear about something. These results didn't come from me. They came from you. From the machine operators who started taking extra care with quality checks. From the maintenance crew who caught problems before they became incidents. From the sales team who rebuilt trust with customers. From the supervisors who started actually supervising instead of just managing paperwork. You did this. I just removed the obstacles that were in your way. I pulled out a document, which brings me to today's announcement. Effective immediately, we're implementing a profit-sharing program. When this company succeeds, everyone who contributed to that success shares in the results. The formula is based on tenure, performance ratings, and overall company profitability. Details will be distributed by HR this afternoon, but here's the bottom line. If we hit our targets this year, every employee in this room will receive a meaningful bonus. Not a token gesture. A real, significant share of profits. The room erupted in applause. I'd expected positive reaction, but the intensity surprised me. People were actually cheering. When the noise died down, I continued. There's one more thing. Some of you have been with this company for decades. You stayed through the bad years out of loyalty and commitment. That loyalty matters to me. So we're also implementing a service recognition program with real benefits. Additional paid time off at 5-year intervals. Enhanced retirement contributions for employees over 10 years. And for those of you approaching retirement, I'm personally reviewing every case to ensure people who built this company aren't leaving with nothing. More applause. I could see some of the older workers actually getting emotional. This company has a future, I concluded. A real future, not just survival, but growth. New products, new markets, new opportunities. And everyone in this room who wants to be part of that future has a place here. All I ask is that you maintain the standards we've set. Show up, do excellent work, treat each other with respect, and commit to making this the best manufacturing company in our industry. Can you do that? The response was unanimous. Loud, enthusiastic agreement. As people filed out, Carl approached me. That was a hell of a speech. It was the truth. This workforce is the company's greatest asset. They just needed leadership that recognized that. They've got it now. Over the next few months, the momentum continued. We launched 3 new product lines based on suggestions from the engineering team that previous management had ignored. We partnered with a technical college to create an apprenticeship program that would develop the next generation of skilled workers. We implemented a continuous improvement program where every employee was encouraged to identify inefficiencies and propose solutions. The reputation shift was remarkable. Industry publications started noticing our quality improvements. Customers who'd been considering switching to competitors renewed contracts. We started getting unsolicited inquiries from talented people who wanted to work for us because word had spread that we were a company that treated employees well and invested in excellence. In month 9, Richard Castellano called me. We'd had minimal contact since the closing per the agreement. His voice was strange when I answered. Vincent, I heard about what you've done with the company. Good things, I hope. Very good things. I ran into Tom Breslin from Acme Industries at a conference. He said you've turned Meridian into one of the most respected manufacturers in the region. Said quality is up, delivery times are down, and you're winning contracts his company used to dominate. We've made progress. There was a long pause. I'm calling to tell you something I should have said at closing. My father built that company from nothing. He poured his life into it. When he died and left it to me, I thought I could just maintain what he'd built without putting in the same work. I was wrong. I let it decline because I didn't have his passion or his commitment. I should have sold it years ago, but I was too proud to admit I'd failed him. His voice cracked slightly. Watching what you've done in less than a year. You've honored his legacy in a way I never could. You saw what that company could be and you made it happen. I just wanted you to know that my father would have been proud of what you've built. Hell, I'm proud of what you've built, even though I had nothing to do with it. Richard, your father built something worth saving. That foundation made everything else possible. Maybe, but you're the one who saved it. Thank you for that. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time. The call had affected me more than I expected. This wasn't just a business acquisition anymore. It was a legacy I was responsible for maintaining and growing. At the 1-year mark, I held another all-hands meeting. This time the mood was celebratory. We'd hit every major target we'd set. Profitability was up 43% from the previous year. Employee satisfaction scores had climbed from 38% to 81%. Safety incident days without accidents had reached a company record. Voluntary turnover was down to 8%, well below industry average. I announced the profit-sharing bonuses, which averaged 18% of annual salary. I recognized outstanding performers publicly. I unveiled plans for a facility expansion that would create 30 new jobs, and I told everyone that we were implementing quarterly all-hands meetings from now on so everyone would always know where the company stood. But the moment that mattered most came after the formal meeting ended. An older employee named Robert, who'd been with the company for 27 years, approached me. He'd worked in maintenance his entire career, quietly keeping equipment running through good management and bad. "Mr. Caruso," he said, "I wanted to thank you for something specific." "Of course, what is it?" When the previous owner was running things, I'd suggested several times that we needed to upgrade our electrical systems. They were outdated, potentially dangerous. He always said it was too expensive. "You've been here a year and you've already scheduled that upgrade. It's not glamorous work. Nobody's going to write articles about better electrical panels. But that decision might save someone's life someday. So thank you for caring enough to invest in the things that matter even when they're not visible." He shook my hand and walked away before I could respond. But his words hit harder than any financial metric. That was the real measure of success. Creating a place where people felt valued enough that someone would seek you out just to thank you for caring about their safety. Now, 18 months after that morning when security threw me out, Meridian Manufacturing is a completely different company. We've expanded into 2 new facilities. We've hired 60 new employees. We've won industry awards for quality and workplace safety. Our profit margins are the highest they've been in 15 years. And most importantly, employee satisfaction is at 91%. People ask me sometimes if I regret the unconventional approach I took that first day. The answer is absolutely not. Those 2 hours showed me exactly what I was working with. It revealed the culture problems I needed to fix. It gave me clarity about which leaders were worth keeping and which needed to go. And it demonstrated that judging people based on appearances rather than substance was a systemic problem that went all the way through the organization. Frank, the security guard who threw me out, never worked in security again. I heard through industry contacts that he struggled to find employment after word spread about the incident. Some people might feel bad about that. I don't. He had multiple opportunities to make different choices that morning. He chose arrogance and dismissiveness over basic professional courtesy. Those choices had consequences. Bruce Hennigan, the operations manager I demoted, lasted another 3 months before I terminated his employment. He never adjusted to the new standards. He kept trying to coast, kept making excuses, kept believing he could do the minimum and collect a paycheck. When I fired him, he claimed I was being unfair. I handed him his performance reviews, his metrics, and documentation of every conversation where I'd outlined expectations. He left without another word. Jennifer Torres, the HR director, surprised me. After a rough first 3 months, she completely transformed her approach. She implemented innovative recruitment strategies, overhauled the employee development program, and became one of my most valuable leaders. She's now vice president of human resources and is building an HR department that other companies benchmark against. Carl McAdams is now chief operating officer and my right hand in running the company. He's being groomed to eventually take over as CEO when I'm ready to step back. He's earned that opportunity through consistent excellence, strategic thinking, and genuine care for the people who work here. Kimberly, the receptionist who was rude to me that first morning, is still with the company. She completed her probation, took every training opportunity offered, and has become a model of professional excellence. She's been promoted twice and now supervises our entire customer service team. She sends me a thank you card every year on the anniversary of the acquisition, acknowledging that being held accountable was the best thing that ever happened to her career. As for me, I learned several critical lessons from this experience. First, culture starts at the top and flows downward. You can't have toxic leadership and expect healthy teams. Second, good people will tolerate bad conditions for a surprisingly long time out of loyalty or necessity, but they'll thrive immediately when given proper leadership. Third, the best way to understand an organization is to observe it when nobody knows you're watching. And fourth, decisive action in the first 30 days of new. Leadership sets the tone for everything that follows. I still do unannounced walkthroughs of the facility. Not dressed down anymore, People know who I am now, but random and unpredictable. I'll show up at 5:30 a.m. to talk with the early shift. I'll walk the production floor at lunch. I'll sit in the break room and just listen to conversations. Those informal observations tell me more about company health than any report or dashboard. The story of me being thrown out that first day has become company legend. New employees hear it during orientation as an illustration of our values. We don't judge people by appearance. We treat everyone with respect. We follow proper protocols. We maintain professional standards regardless of circumstances. And we hold ourselves accountable when we fall short. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd announced myself that morning instead of letting Frank throw me out. I would have taken over the company without really understanding the depth of the culture problems. I might have kept Bruce and others who didn't deserve to stay. I might have moved more slowly on necessary changes. The company would have improved, but not as dramatically or as quickly. That humiliating experience of being escorted out of my own building was actually a gift. It gave me perfect clarity about what needed to change. It justified the decisive actions I took in those first critical weeks, and it created a story that became part of the company's identity, a reminder that we're not who we used to be and we're never going back. Last month, Gerald came to visit again. We walked through the expanded facility, watched production lines running smoothly, and observed employees who were clearly engaged and committed to their work. Afterward, we had lunch in my office. "You've built something special here," he said. "Not just a profitable company, but a place where people actually want to work. That's rare." "I had excellent guidance," I replied, raising my glass to him. "You had the wisdom to listen and the courage to execute. Those are rarer skills than you think." He paused. "So what's next? You've turned this company around. Are you going to look for another acquisition?" "Eventually, maybe, but right now I'm focused on taking Meridian to the next level. We're profitable, but we can be more profitable. We're efficient, but we can be more efficient. We're good, but we can be great. There's still work to do." That's the right answer. Too many people fix something and immediately look for the next challenge. The real art is taking something good and making it excellent. He was right. This company has a foundation now, a culture of excellence, a committed workforce, strong leadership, and clear direction. But excellence isn't a destination, it's a continuous process. Every day presents new opportunities to improve, new challenges to address, new potential to unlock. Sometimes when I'm walking through the facility, I think about that moment when Frank was escorting me across the parking lot. I remember feeling calm, calculating, already planning my next moves. I knew exactly what I was going to do when I came back. I knew heads would roll. I knew the company would never be the same. What I didn't know was how satisfying it would be to transform not just a balance sheet, but an entire organizational culture. To see people who'd been beaten down by poor leadership suddenly thrive when given proper support. To watch a company everyone had written off become an industry leader. To build something that would last beyond my ownership and benefit people for decades to come. That's the real victory. Not embarrassing the security guard who threw me out. Not firing the incompetent managers. Not even the financial success, though that matters. The real victory is creating something sustainable and meaningful. A company where people are proud to work. A business that serves its community well. A legacy worth building. And it all started with a security guard who didn't know who I was and a decision to let him throw me out, so I could see exactly what I was dealing with. Sometimes the best way to start fixing something is to let it reveal itself completely first. No masks, no management theater, just raw truth about what's really happening when nobody important is watching. I walked back into that building 18 months ago with acquisition papers and a plan for transformation. I'm walking through it today as the owner of a company that's exceeded every expectation I had. The journey from that parking lot to this office has been intense, challenging, and absolutely worth every difficult decision along the way. That's my story. A tale of unexpected humiliation that became the catalyst for complete transformation. Of security guards who judged books by covers and paid the price. Of good people finally getting the leadership they deserved. And of a business that went from decline to excellence because someone cared enough to do the hard work of real change. If there's a lesson here, it's this. Never judge your situation by its worst moment. That morning when I was being escorted out could have been humiliating. Instead, it was the beginning of something remarkable. Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom, or be thrown out of your own building, to gain the clarity and motivation necessary for real transformation. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so successful that the people who underestimated you have no choice but to respect what you've created.